Hello folks, Dick Fairburn here. Still talking about 1911s. Today I'm going to talk about the features you want on these kind of pistols. Roughing on the strap, sights, trigger. Let's talk about the features you want for a really first-class carry 1911. Stick around, we'll get started in a minute. I mentioned once that I really only have one full built from the ground up custom gun made by Richard Heine, and this is it. Took me over 7 years from the time I dropped it off with him to get it back. And I could probably buy 5, maybe 6 Glocks for what I've got invested in this 10mm pistol. But this is what I wanted, and if you're willing to pay for what you want, you can get almost anything you want nowadays. So I'm going to go over some of the features that I think are essential on a really good carry 1911, whether you're carrying it for self-defense against people, self-defense against bad animals in the wilderness. Whatever model you pick, 5-inch, Commander, Officer's model, one of the others, the features are going to be pretty similar throughout them. And the neat thing is, you don't have to pay a custom pistolsmith to put all this on there for you nowadays. There are pistols coming from the factory with most of the features you want for some rather surprisingly low prices. So let's get started. We'll start at the top. You need good sights. Fixed sights will do virtually anything you want in almost every caliber. This is a 10mm. I tend to use 180 to 200 grain loads in it most of the time. I've never needed to adjust the sights. It's on. In my 38 Super that we built up a number of years ago, we'll show that it's empty. I put a Bomar adjustable sight on that because we were going to do some really weird loads in 38 Super, from light bullets to heavy bullets, fast to slow. So we wanted the adjustable sights. Once I got it sighted in for a kind of a median load, I never really needed to adjust them again. So adjustable sights are fine if you want them. But in most cases, for what we're going to do with a 1911, I don't think we need them. Perhaps if you're hunting out to maximum distance of 75 yards or so, maybe 100 if you're going to stretch it, and you're going to use iron sights, then a good set of adjustable sights would be great. A lot of people are going for optics nowadays. Optics can be cut into the slide of a 1911 just fine. I don't have one, but if that's what you want, you can get them ready to go from the factory, or you can get them cut by a custom gunsmith. The next step, this is an option. This is a luxury in some ways. I'll show you close-ups here, but I have the top of most of my 1911s flattened and serrated at about 40 lines per inch. That keeps any glare from shining up into your iron sights when you're using them. And it looks really neat. And to me, it's about 50% glare and about 50% looks. It doesn't cost that much, but it really makes a pistol look like it's been customized. So I go in for that. All right, working our way down, we're going to talk about a barrel. Most barrels nowadays will say match grade on them. If you've got an inexpensive 1911 model and it's not shooting as good as you think it should, then perhaps an upgrade to a match grade barrel would be good. When you fit those, you need a bushing that's fit in tight. If you feel along here, you're going to find a little tiny swell as you come to the muzzle. That's so that it wedges into that bushing pretty tightly and locks down that front end. But once the slide has pulled back about a 1/4 inch or sometimes even less, that swell is gone. So you have plenty of play there for that slide and barrel not to interfere with each other. The rear of your barrel should lock up very tightly. So when you let this thing go into battery with a little bit of a bump, if you try to push down on the top of that barrel, it should not move at all. If it does, you're going to lose accuracy because you're going to get a little bit different variation of pressure there depending on what ammo you're using, how well it loads into the chamber, and things like that. The back end of that barrel should be absolutely rigid. Now, different pistolsmiths have different ways of accurizing 1911s. If you want one to truly be accurate, it's probably going to have some hand fitting. Here's what I've learned over the years. If the barrel is locked rigidly in the slide at the front and at the rear, you can't push it down when it's in battery. That's the most important aspect you're going to get towards accuracy. A lot of smiths will squeeze in the frames of the slide, and then they will hand lap it back and forth on that rail until you just get a super tight slide to frame fit. Now, a lot of pistol smiths will disagree with me, but in my opinion, that does almost nothing for practical accuracy. If you're going to crank this down in a ransom rest, which I have done, especially with the 38 Super when I was testing loads, then you need the slide and frame to be tight, very tight, almost too tight to work, because you're indexing off the frame when you put this in a machine rest. But when you shoot it in your hand, you're indexing off the sights. So if the barrel locks up super tight in the slide, it's locked to those sights, and as long as those sights are aligned by your human ocular equipment here, it's going to be an accurate pistol. The best way to do the slide fit, and this is just my opinion, I think you need it tight for about 1/2 inch. When it goes into battery like that, you want the back end of this to have not a lot of play. You got to have some, or you're going to lose reliability. But once it comes out of battery, just a little, then I think those rails should be almost downright sloppy. That's going to allow you to have top accuracy and top reliability, and not have to fight with chambering or other problems that can happen when they're just too tight. This is a Rock River 5-inch steel 1911. Show you empty. This belonged to a friend of mine. I ended up with it. This thing, when he got it, would literally shoot 1.5 to 2-inch groups, 5-shot groups at 50 yards. And his eyes at the time were good enough to be able to shoot that well. He'd put about 300 or 400 rounds through it. He was at my house one day and he said, I probably need to clean this thing. I don't even know how to take it down. We took it down, and I had to get not only a bushing wrench, but a little brass hammer to tap the bushing around to get it disassembled. That's too tight. That's how you get those phenomenal groups. But when we cleaned it, I took a piece of crocus cloth and just worked the inside of that bushing just a little. I didn't even take out 1/1000. I just kind of took out a skosh. That made it easier to put together and take it apart, and on the range, it didn't make any difference so far as we could tell. This is one of the most accurate 1911s I've ever owned. This lightweight Commander, when it was new, built up by Dick Heine, he did not do a full build on it. It shot 1.5-inch groups, firing it rollover prone at 25 yards. So they can be super accurate if you want them to be, and they can be super reliable. Okay, sights, optics, or irons. Fixed will work for 99% of what most of us do. Get that barrel tight so you cannot push the back down at all. Now, this particular pistol, as we move down a little bit, this has a one-piece guide rod. When this 38 Super was built up, that was kind of the fad. Everybody wanted a one-piece guide rod, and so that's what Heine put it in at the time. I haven't bothered to take it out, but generally I don't have mine built with a guide rod. You almost have to have a bushing wrench to take them apart, whereas with the standard recoil plug, you can take them down with your hands. I don't know that it increases accuracy for competitors. They were making these rods out of tungsten for a long time. That added a couple ounces of heavy weight out towards the muzzle and would dampen some of the recoil and muzzle flip for a competitive shooter. This is a lightweight. I don't want to add any more weight than I have to, so this is just a steel rod. But as I say, that's an option. And one of the reasons I don't like the guide rod, and there are instructors who will tell you that this is a really bad thing to do, but I do it because this is how Jeff Cooper taught it. If he wanted to do a press check to make sure there was a round in the chamber, put a thumb in the trigger guard, finger on the plug, and you can very easily pinch that back and see if it's loaded. Now, there are instructors who will tell you that this is an extraordinarily dangerous thing to do, because if that thumb gets back there on the trigger, it's going to go bang in battery, and you're going to have a little bit of flash burn on the end of your finger. That may be true, and if I had greasy hands or if it was really wet, I wouldn't do that. What that leads me to is slide serrations. They all have serrations here. This Rock River has serrations at the front as well. I like those. To me, that's an add-on, because if you're worried about this trigger guard pinch check, now you can come from underneath, very easily grab those serrations at the front and do your press check. So I like the extra things out there. Again, some instructors don't. They think you're going to rack the slide from there. You may get your hand ahead of the muzzle, may get a round that goes off. I don't think it's all that much inherently more dangerous than the other ways to do it, but it does allow you to do that underneath press check, which is a good, safe way to do things. Triggers. Triggers come in short and long. It's kind of what you want. I don't notice that much difference in the triggers myself. I kind of prefer the short ones, but I can fire a long one just fine. If you find that you have a problem with, if you have big hands, maybe a long trigger. If you have smaller hands, maybe a short trigger. As I say, I do okay pretty much with all of them. Safeties. Thumb safety. They're going to have a thumb safety. The original military was just a little square tab right there. This is an extended. There's a couple different variations of extended safeties that you can see here. I like the extended ones. Make sure you're going to get a hold of it. You can leave your thumb on there, and that's a good way to shoot. Leave your thumb on that safety. You're not going to get underneath it, because if you get a thumb underneath that safety, when it comes up in recoil, you can inadvertently put the safety on, and then all of a sudden it won't go bang. What about an ambidextrous safety? I have them on all of my pistols. If something happens to me and I need to get on this pistol with the left hand, you know, I need to get up here and deactivate the safety this way, which is awkward, or lose some control by flipping around and using the thumb on the other side. Or I have an ambidextrous safety and I can use it just as easily as I can with the right one here. It's not an expensive add-on. There are a couple of different varieties of how they're made and mounted, and I think the ambidextrous safety is worthwhile. If you notice, this pistol does have laser grips. This was my carry gun, and I had both tritium night sights and a laser on them, kind of as a backup. So I had two ways to aim this pistol in dark conditions. It's entirely up to you. If you like them, they're fine. If you can get the green ones, they're always going to be brighter to the human eye than the red one. They're more visible in higher levels of light. With a red one, it needs to be pretty dark to see it. Still talking about sights. If you're going to go with optical sights, an option is to get high irons. Most people call them suppressor height now, because they're high enough to shoot over a can if you ever happen to have one. I've tried them with co-witness suppressor sights and a red dot, and it was a very busy sight picture. I just didn't like it at all. Myself, if I'm going to use optics, I'm going to leave my low sights so that I can get them if I have to, down that lower 1/3. Or I'm experimenting now with a Glock that has a red dot and no front sight at all. Just a slick slide, only a red dot like I might have on my M4 carbine with the sights folded down. Old dog, new tricks. I'm not completely convinced I need optics yet. But bear in mind, if you want those suppressor height sights, that's going to have to be an add-on for most pistols. One other feature I will tell you, the original 1911 and the A1 had a much taller ejection port. This opening did not go as far down the side of the slide. And if you've ever seen those empties fired from pistols like that, a lot of times they will have a flat on one side of the empty case when it's kicked out, because the side of the case is actually being flattened by that bottom of the ejection port. Almost all the pistols now have a considerably lower ejection port, and that stops that. And you will also notice that a lot of these pistols have what I call a wipe here right at the back. Here's maybe a bigger, better example of that wipe. Busting that corner off with a little groove through there also doesn't bang up your brass as bad. So it's primarily a feature for reloaders. I think the Colt Gold Cup was the first to ever have that kind of wipe machined in there, but it's very common nowadays for both factory and customized guns. So lowering the ejection port, knocking off that corner there, is going to make your brass last longer. If you're not a reloader, it might go a little towards eliminating malfunctions. So a lower ejection port and knocking off that corner right there, that's a good idea for any 1911. I'll show you a close-up of the sights that Mr. Heine's making now. My next video will have an interview with Dick Heine. Not only, I think, the best custom pistolsmith still kicking, but also makes, I think, the best iron sights in the business. And his latest generation of these, I'll show you a close-up. He calls a ledge, and this was added at the request of some military operators in Afghanistan and Iraq. And their thought process was, if I need to hook that rear sight on a belt or my boot, or somehow I'm down to one hand, but I need to clear a malfunction or cycle the slide, having a nice ledge there to do that would be very helpful. There are some sights that are a smooth wedge from the very front all the way up to the top. No ledge in there at all, just a smooth feature. And if you like them, that's great, but they're difficult to work with that one-hand slide manipulation. So bear that in mind. And I think this ledge is a great idea. I will also show you a close-up. This is something that you probably never need to do. But when Colt brought out their Delta Elite 10mm in 1988, I believe, the first few guns quickly developed a cracking problem. And I'll show you a close-up of the cut right above where the slide stop operates. And they were cracking in that top rail, the rail that the slide runs on, above that opening. It's just the 10mm is a hot round. It's stressing that steel frame more than it could stand, and started to get some cracks developing. Colt's answer to that was just to mill out that section of the top rail where the slide runs. So now you have, instead of one continuous rail on the left side, you have an interrupted rail. And the interruption is where it needs to flex. And that cut allows it to flex and removes the material that could crack in the process. So it was a simple fix. And a lot of the Colts that I see now come with that cut standard. I think they have pretty much standardized that on all models and all calibers. Probably only important in the 10mm, but it's not a bad thing to have. Some 1911 folks like to have a ramped barrel installed. A ramped barrel, you need to make a cut in the slide for the barrel to go in, because the ramp of the barrel is a part of the barrel. It's a permanent, integral part of the barrel. It allows you to change the feeding angle just slightly. It allows you to give a little bit more support at the back end of that case. So if you're firing something hot, like a 38 Super, 9x23, 45 Super, 10mm, that unsupported part of the case can get what some people call a smile when it starts to bulge a little bit, and worse than that, it can blow. And blowing is not a good thing. I've done it a couple times, and I don't recommend it. So if you like a ramped barrel, there might be some coming that way from the factory, especially in the 2011 types. But it's not generally necessary unless you're using over-the-top kind of loadings. Slide locks, they make an extended slide lock, comes back further towards the extended safety. I do not like them. The reason I do not like them is the more extension you get on there with this kind of a grip, the more likely you are to hit that extended slide stop and lock that slide open with rounds still in the magazine. So that is it's a safety issue. That can render your pistol inoperable if you keep locking that slide lock on. Primarily with the Berettas, because they have a very large side slop. And it has also happened to some people who put the Glock extended slide stop on there. So in my opinion, extended slide stops, can't really say it, it's not a good idea. Hammers, you still see some 1911 pattern pistols with the original spur hammer and even the original grip safety. If you're going to shoot it much, you don't want to buy that pistol, or you're going to need it to go to someone and be replaced. The most comfortable way to ever fire a 1911 is a Rowell style, commander style hammer, and the beaver tail that will trap that in there. And I have that on all my pistols. That way, the beaver tail widens out the recoil area of that tang, so it's not beating you into a callus right here. and also it's preventing that bite. And if you've been bitten by a 1911, it'll make you a little bit flinchy until you can work through that. Grip safeties, I do not think they should be pinned. I am very much against that. That's an integral part of the safety mechanism of the 1911. I think it needs to be intact. However, most of the new grip safeties will have a bump at the bottom. I call it a speed bump. I don't know what you call it. Here are factory grip safeties with a bump at the bottom. That just ensures that that thing is going to get depressed and make the pistol ready to fire. That typically happens with people with hands that just don't fit it real well, and when they're working at speed. When they're really grabbing that gun coming out at top speed, sometimes they won't quite get that grip safety in the standard style. This was a standard grip safety on this aluminum Colt. It was an aluminum beaver tail that Mr. Heine put on there a long time ago before they started putting speed bumps. So I just sanded it down for grip. I laid on some Brownell's Acraglass epoxy compound, finished it off the way I wanted, hit it with some black spray paint, and now I have a speed bump on that. That was my carry pistol for several years, and I want to make damn sure that I was going to get that grip safety engaged when I needed it. I talked about triggers, short or long, however you want. The 1911 trigger can typically be tuned from about 3.5 to 5 pounds with standard equipment. I wouldn't go lighter than 3.5 on something that I'm going to use for self-defense. Under stress, the lighter the trigger, the more likely you're going to be to, launch a round when you weren't quite meaning to do so. And if you shoot someone when you're not quite justified, that's going to come back to haunt you. So I think about a 4.25 pound trigger is really nice if it breaks crisply. And both the original trigger lock work and the 80 series, or one of the firing pin block variations, most gunsmiths can give them a really super nice crisp trigger now. Competitors, when they were shooting, especially the 38 Super race guns, with titanium parts in there, reducing the mass of the hammer, the sear, the trigger, the disconnector, you get those down to titanium parts that have very little mass. They could tune that trigger down to about 2 to 2.5 pounds, and it would not follow when the slide went home. That's for competition only. If you have a pistol like that, I would say you need to go back to the steel parts, and you need to get a carry type trigger on there, which is going to be in the vicinity of 4 pounds. Okay, the magazine catch. There's a standard height. I'm not going to give you a measurement. It protrudes out of the frame a certain amount. There are extended magazine catches that will help you get that more easily with your thumb. Okay, this 10mm has one that is, I'd say it sticks out of the frame about 50% further than that. I've never even looked at the one on the Rock River. It's just a standard. So by making that a little taller, it's just that much easier to get that without having to shift shift the pistol around in your hand to get your thumb on that. Magazine catch story. This 1911 was, I've had a couple different slides on it over the years. The frame was made in '52, so that's the second year of production of the alloy frame Commanders. And a friend thought he owed me something for taking him hunting in Wyoming for a few years, and so he showed up with this frame and a slide and a box of parts, basically. The frame was in the white. It had been checkered, and that was all. The rear sight had been cut for a Heine sight badly. I don't know who he had to do the work. So I had Mr. Heine build it up, and it's kind of a ground-up build, but he refused to put his name on it because he didn't think the checkering was up to his standards, so he wasn't going to put his name on something that was substandard. When I got it back, I laid down rollover prone at the 25-yard line, fired some 230 grain spear gold dot hollow points, and put them in a group you literally could cover with a silver dollar, so I knew it was super accurate. But putting a couple hundred rounds through it to make sure it was going to work before I carried it for serious use, I found that it didn't want to feed those hollow points from a full magazine. If I had an 8-round magazine in there, it would chamber the first round normally, but not all the time. Second round, it could choke. Third round, it could choke. But once we got down to that point, then it would eat them like candy. Full metal jackets worked great. 200 grain semi-wad cutter USPSA practice loads ate them. But something about those big hollow points, it didn't want to feed them when the magazine was full. Bob James, a buddy, and I were playing with it at the range, and finally he said, well, put your hand under the magazine and push up. So I did. I pushed up on the magazine, and then it would feed those 230 hollow points all the time. First round, second round, third round, no problem. Pull my hand off when the magazine was full, and it would choke. So I called Mr. Heine, told him what was going on. He said, send it back. And he called me a few days later, and he said, well, I figured out what it is. And he said, the magazine catch is slightly low in the frame from where it should be. He said, I had to get the blueprints of the darn thing out. It is noticeably different. So he called someone he knew at Colt, and he goes, hey, I've got a lightweight Commander here with the magazine catch that's a little bit too low in the frame. And the guy said, yeah, it's an old like second year production or something like that. When we set it up, we kind of got that out of measurement, and said the boss said, well, take them to the range with some ammo and see if they feed. And they did. But at the time, in 1952, the only ammo you were going to get was 230 grain full metal jacket rounds, and it will feed them. But when you throat the barrel later on in life and you try to feed those big blunt hollow points, it didn't like it very much. And he said, well, it's literally sitting too low in the frame. And he said, two ways we can fix it. I can modify all of your magazines so that the catch holds them a little bit higher, or I can order a partially finished magazine catch from like Ed Brown, some guy that makes custom parts. And he said, I'll have him leave it oversized, and I will just custom fit a mag catch to hold the magazines 20, 25 thousandths higher. And that fixed it. So that's what a good pistolsmith can tell you. 1952, that's Korean War technology. That's when they set up their machinery by hand. Now these things are made on CNC machines, and once that program is set in the computerized equipment, it's going to make it exactly right every time. The new 1911s are not likely to have the kind of problems we saw with the older ones and need the kind of custom gunsmithing that we needed to have done. So you'll notice that these three pistols are almost identical. They're set up just the way I like them. Good high visibility sights. If I didn't mention, the front sight should be a dovetail, just like the rear sight. Originally they were a little rectangular square with a stud on the bottom of the sight that was put in, expanded, peened out from below, and sometimes silver soldered as well. And even when they did that pretty well, once in a while you'd still lose a front sight. The dovetail system eliminates that completely. I don't think there's any maker out there other than if they're trying to make a 1911 A1 clone for collectors to have, it might still have the staked front sight. But for a practical pistol, good high visibility sights, dovetailed in the front, dovetailed in the back. If you think you need adjustable, go with Bomar or some other good system, but I don't think you will probably need adjustable sights. I like the serrations and the flattening on the top. Make sure your ejection port is opened out so that it doesn't beat up your cases, and that little wipe there on the corner will facilitate that as well. One other custom feature that I guess I didn't allude to, I've got some close-up pictures. A couple of these, the rear of the slide is serrated to the same degree as the rear sight. It looks really nice. I don't think it's necessary at all. That was part of Mr. Heine's package when he built custom pistols. He would serrate the back of the slide. That eliminates reflection and glare, and it just looks really sharp. Makes it really look custom. Trigger, short or long, around 4 pounds and good and crisp. Magazine catch, if you want one that's a little taller, that stands out and is easier to reach, I think that's a good idea. No extended slide stop. Go with the standard one. An extended thumb safety is a great idea. And an extended ambidextrous on the other side, in my opinion, truly makes it a fighting pistol. If for some reason I'm damaged, I'm down to one hand, I might have to shoot around a severe corner where I can't get around there without exposing myself, but I can if I go left-handed, then that makes this much more operable in that left-hand situation. Trigger guards. This Commander was serrated at one point. It was a fad back in the 70s, 80s to square that trigger guard, and a lot of times either serrate or check ring. And the shooters would put the first finger of their support hand up there. That's kind of fallen out of favor now. You can see that you kind of get a little bit of twisting of the pistol with that. Just gripping it square below the trigger guard I think is a more stable and effective way to shoot it. So there's a million things you can do to a 1911. It's kind of like a Barbie house. You can accessorize it to no end. But you don't need to. And most of these features of good triggers, ambidextrous safeties, opened ejection ports, some kind of roughening on that front strap and mainspring housing to really get a good grip on it. A lot of the pistols are coming this way. Now my interview with Dick Heine, I've already filmed it and we'll be editing it, and it will follow this. Interestingly, towards the end, I asked him, I said, what do you think is the future of custom pistol smithing? And he said he thinks it's going to die. That he thinks his generation of those hand-built, hand-finished pistols may be over, because with CNC machining, we have this 1900 vintage pistol into the 21st century. Now the parts are almost completely replaceable, just as they are in a Glock or a Smith & Wesson M&P or something like that. So he really thinks the 1911, I mean, you can still get a variety of features, and you may want to change some of the features you get on your pistol. Or if you have an older pistol, you might want to customize it. So there will always be that kind of work. But he said he really thinks that you know, the one-man shop who made a living, did very well for himself and has a pretty Corvette to show for it. He thinks that era might be over because of the new technology and how the 1911s are made. And so some of the 1911 haters out there about, oh, they got to be custom fit, you know, they're not reliable, they're this, they're that. That is going away so fast that this is almost a throw together parts kind of pistol platform now. And you still get the best trigger of any auto pistol out there. Folks, thanks for watching these videos. I really appreciate you watching, especially those of you that have come this far and gone to the end. Could you please give me a subscription, give me a thumbs up, comment. Love to hear the comments. If you disagree with me, feel free. Tell me what you think is right, what you think is wrong. But times are tough out there, folks. We've seen, you know, campus unrest again. I don't know where the summer of 24 is going to go. I'm thinking ahead to a video that I'm probably going to put together on this. If this election goes bad, this country may go bad. So get what you need for guns, magazines, ammunition. Be prepared to protect yourself, because that may be your only option, depending on how things go in this country. Please, be safe out there. Okay, we got them both here now. You ready? Bud got one. Ginger got one. Oh, she missed it. She usually gets them, doesn't she, Bud? Okay, girl, last one. You ready? You ready? Yeah! That's all there is till next time.